So I am here to try to analyze what race is. What do we say when we say race and how we understand it? I will concentrate on blackness due to the current presidential election, but I think the theoretical aspects of my presentation will go pretty much for any race. Let's see the first. So I have a question for you. Please keep your answers short because we are on a time table. Is Obama black?
That I know, I read the book, but I just wanted to, in fact, the book is, the ending of the book is kind of grisly.
So what do you think? Everybody talks about...
You're asking us to respond? I didn't understand what you said.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Black in the sense that we use that term today, politically?
Is he black? Because everybody is talking about the 44th president as being the black president and Obama being black. I mean, it's everywhere, isn't it?
And he's just as much white as he is black. It's a hard question to answer.
Well, in this country, with the way we look at race, the argument would be for many of us that he's black, and if it had been years ago, he'd been Negro, okay? Mm-hmm. But what's really interesting, because I'm preparing a paper on this race myself, I thought that it really marginalized all of us who were biracial, by focusing as an African American. And after spending 3 or 4 weeks off and on working on the paper, I realized something yesterday. You know what? He's probably a genuine African American because his father's African and his mother's American. So, it's really interesting. I said, what the hell do I do now with all this writing I did about whether he's black or not?
Well, it is an important question because we could also talk about him as white, because he's exactly 50-50. There is a tradition of people who have been mixed for centuries, and in their case it's very difficult to tell, so you couldn't discuss the topic, but in his case it's absolutely down the line. So what are we talking about blackness all the time? It's not the fact whether he's mixed or mestizo or whatever, mulatto or whatever. My discussion is, why do we categorize him as black? That's the point of this idea. And he himself said that, what I quote up there, not the most conventional candidate. This is what he meant, that it's not usually associated, the higher positions in our society were not traditionally associated with any minority at all. Now, what I would like to talk about is the classification by which we classify race in our mind and how we understand these things normally. We do, when we meet someone, when we see someone, immediately we kind of size up that person. And in that, we consider these following elements that you see on the screen: race, gender, sexuality, class, and age. Why? Because they are visible. They are visible on our face, on our wrinkles, on our body, and different things. So these are kind of things that are giving you clues as to who this person might be. The reason we do that is because that's how our mind works. That's how we understand meaning. Because meaning is always tied to generalization. Otherwise, we couldn't possibly conceive of notions. For example, if I say a table, what do you think a table is? Well, a table is a table. You recognize this one, you recognize a small table, you recognize a table from the 16th century as a table. Why? because in your mind you generalized an idea what a table ought to be. So even if it's small, even if it's white, it's brown, it's different ways, you will still recognize it because you have the general idea. That's why we do that with humans as well. We gather a general idea in our head based on these attributes that are visible attributes, and the person hasn't even opened their mouth yet. So this is how we we read and classify social difference, because these attributes normally are tied to a certain social history. And so what we are reading is not just how old this person is, or what this person is, male or female, or what race, but we are also sizing up the social belonging of this person. And I could even add, ways of dressing and etc. Of course, these things may be misleading. Has it ever happened to you that you see a person and all of a sudden you are not sure whether this person is a man or a woman? It happened to me. So gender lines can be blurry sometimes. Racial lines definitely can be blurry. I never knew that Lena Horne was a black singer until I came to this country. It never occurred to me. But it's so obvious to you, to those of you who heard about her. I mean, she has been dead a long time, unfortunately. I think so, yeah. And so we are readers of social belonging and social difference. That's what we are doing. There is a certain stigma attached to age, old fogey. That's where I am right now, in this category. So people, when they look at me, they think, yeah, well, she's out of it. And so this is what we are reading, and race is one of these categories. Now let's go a little further. These differences, and here you see people of different races, cultures, geographical areas, etc., they are inscribed onto our body. What do we mean? What we mean is we equate nature with culture. That, for example, if you compare the two pictures in the center above, what your feeling is about these two people, the lady in black and white and the native indigenous person next to the lady. What would your gut feeling, and just don't be ashamed if you have any sort of prejudice or any idea, your first absolute gut feeling about these two pictures. Yes?
One strikes me, the one on the left strikes me as being more civilized, the one on the right strikes me as being
Exactly, that's the comment I was fishing for. Because the one doesn't have any racial or cultural attributes. Not racial, yes, the eyes, but no cultural attributes in terms of dresses and hairdo and all that stuff that the other pictures have. And so therefore, it's closer to European ideals of class and beauty, and looks more sophisticated than the others that display traits of native hair, color, dress, etc., jewelry, whatever. We do tend to think that whatever is closer to Europeanness is more sophisticated. Why do we do that? I mean, are we bad people or what? Are we a bunch of racists? I don't think so. So there is a reason.
Or who a bunch of racists?
Are we, all of us?
Oh, people in general, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's natural you tend to favor people who look more like you and share ideals and everything like you. But I find it really interesting that there's something about the oppressed, and I'm saying this more for clarification and knowledge, that they tend to want to identify with the oppressor. Think of the Patty Hearst case. First she's a victim, then she's a bank robber.
Yeah.
And the first millionaire, the first African American lady to become a millionaire in this country, made her money off of chemicals that was put in black women's hair to straighten it.
Yeah,
You know?
that's an ironic.
Yeah, I mean, so there's just something there by to look more like your oppressor,
Very
and
good.
maybe deep down inside, then I'll be
Yes.
accepted more or something.
And not just to want to look like more, but also to be ashamed of if you don't look like that person. This is the straightening of the hair is a very good example of that. Yes.
Well, I thought what you were looking for was, you know, since our culture, since we were, you know, colonized by Europeans, and you know, our culture in the most empirical form is European. We tend to be a little ethnocentric, and since we have a European culture because we're all, you know, our ancestors are from Europe in the most part, then we tend to identify with the European standard. Yeah.
That's a good comment.
Yeah, same thing.
Same thing? Yeah. But with the globalization, is it sustainable to, and with the, you know, I look around here. Are all of you, us, are European?
No, thank God. No, thank
So, is it sustainable, this idea, in this era of globalization and universalism? The world is ours. It's not just a country or a city or a neighborhood. It's the entire world. Because the problem with this idea, which is justifiable and understandable, but the problem with this is that that you do tend to classify. Because if we are on top, then who is at the bottom? Somebody will have to be. So, therefore, this thinking is called eurocentric thinking. And this is what our education teaches us from kindergarten. You know, that European culture is somehow superior, that the cradle of civilization, the cradle of humanity was the Greeks and the Romans. What about the India, you know, 5,000 years prior to the Greeks and Romans? What about Egypt? What about China? You know, they had very sophisticated, very developed cultures much before the Greeks ever appeared on the scene. So this kind of ignoring the rest of the world it makes us poor, simply.
I think I heard this at the age of maybe 55 in school when the teacher said, Mr. Jackson, evidently you don't understand about history. I said, what about history? And she said, history is written by people in power, and of course they're going to write it to favor themselves. So all we are is what we've been taught, and the history's been written by the European.
White
so we grow
men,
up and we think that without knowing it.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
right.
And sometimes when you find it out, it's difficult to change. Maybe after yesterday to be different, because I had no problems that a black American may be elected, but a black American with a name like Obama, Hussein, I thought, you know what? Maybe now is time, because I always wondered, like American Indians and Negroes have, or blacks have European names, but Germans don't have Swedish names, Swedish don't have Italian names, so why do all of us have these European names?
That's right.
And the reason is you go to change that name, depending on where you live, it can cost you your livelihood.
Yeah.
Because then, when you have that different name, that says you're not buying into what's being sold to you, so you can be a problem down here.
Mr. Jackson, I believe, I very much appreciate your comments, but if you could just reduce them a little bit, because I'm on a time frame here, you know, I've been given 45 minutes and that's that. So I need to keep going. So based on these physical attributes that you see on the pictures, we are kind of concluding in our mind ways in which this person thinks, feels, acts about his or her intelligence, about his or her culture. Like these people who are in native dresses and wears jewelry, they are probably stupid or backward or just traditional, and they lack the intelligence, sophistication, and technical savvy as we do. And it may be true, but may also not be true. How do you know? But we tend to identify people based on these visible attributes, and we conclude things about their nature and capacity. And this is how race is constructed. But in some cases, how do you judge race? What about these? Are they black? Are they white? Are they Hispanics? What are they? They are mixes of the two on the top, this is pretty clear. But the rest is very problematic to pose, to put them in one group or the other, or in which group at all. So what Stuart Hall, a theorist who deals a lot with race and representation and the media, he's a media critic who was teaching at the Open University in London. Now he retired. He himself is from Jamaica. And he has this idea of a floating signifier for a race. No, the signifier means something that conveys meaning, right? And floating signifier is something that is not stable. Table is not a floating signifier. Everybody knows what I mean by a table, or by a room, or by a whatever. But race means different things at different times to different people, based on different upbringing, interests, political advancement, etc., etc. And so in this signifier, we have all of these satellites inscribed: the history, the context, in which context you meet this person, the events, the culture, the narratives. The narratives meaning the history of this group, or the personal narrative of that person. So all of this makes up for this signifier in terms of race or class. So therefore, Stuart Hall concludes that race is a discursive construct. Now this is pretty hard to swallow, because if you see a black person, you will say, I can't tell the difference. I mean, what do you mean it's a discursive construct? I mean, it is pretty obvious to me who is black and who is white and who is Oriental. What do you mean it's a discursive construct? It doesn't make sense. Well, it does, because it's not the biological attributes of race that I'm disputing here. I am disputing the value attached to those biological attributes. You see, there is a tremendous difference here. What we are talking about is reality and representation of this reality, like a mirror of this reality. And so this discursive construct has come about by colonization. Before colonization, and I'm going to come back to that, race has not been a real issue. It has not played a role like it does in today's society ever since colonization. The major colonizations happened in the end of 15th century and went on in the 18th and 19th century. This is when different races in large groups encountered each other, and the Europeans were very quick to establish their superiority in more than one aspect, and race was one of them. So, therefore, these discourses about alterity, alter in Latin means the other, right? And so alterity means someone other than European. And these discourses of alterity are tied to colonization, because this justified the colonizing enterprise. Otherwise, there is no justification, moral or historical or otherwise, to invade a country that didn't do anything to us, rings a bell, and to impose our superiority, our language, our religion, our everything, modus vivendi, modus operandi, and everything. How can you justify that? The only justification, and I put it in big quotation mark, is these people need to be civilized. They are primitive. They are stupid. We need to teach them. We need to civilize them. We need to educate them, teach them how to eat with forks and knives, you know. And this is why we are here. This is our burden. We have to civilize the world. You know, the colonizing enterprise has been called a civilizing mission, la mission civilisatrice, by the French. This was a very, very good way to put it, because that's exactly how the Europeans saw it, that it was their obligation to civilize. Well, in the meantime, they ransacked those countries. Well, that's kind of a collateral benefit, isn't it? So that is when race became a liability for those who are not European and didn't look like European, because they were put in this inferior position to justify colonization, even after many centuries. And this created a way of thinking in the people who were colonized and oppressed, that they wanted to be similar to the oppressor. They wanted, why? Because that had prestige. And they wanted to look like them. They wanted to act like them. This is called normally in theoretical terms mimicry. You mimic, you imitate the way the people of higher prestige acts, things. You know, think of the wannabes. That's a similar phenomenon. You know, somebody who can't afford it but acts as though. Well, it's the same thing in racial terms in Africa, in the Americas, that a lot of people of minorities trying to. For example, one example that comes to mind is Porfirio Diaz, who was the strongman in Mexico in the late 19th and early 20th century. And he was of indigenous descent, and he used rice powder to make his face look whiter. And when the Americans went to visit Mexico City, he kicked out all the indigenous employees, and he hired specifically European-looking people. He went as far, because he said, they will think we are just a bunch of Indians. And so that was supposed to be bad. So this is the history, or the context, the historical context for race. You are absolutely right that history is written by whom? By the winners. Nobody cares about the losers, what they think, because they lost. And by men, not by women. Nobody listens to oral sources. Now this is changing. There is a tremendous inclusiveness or inclusion or desire for inclusion in lately among the so-called new historians. You know, this way of looking at history as a narrative, not like a science, like people would go into the archives. Well, who writes the archives? What makes it? What document makes it to the archives? You know, they would say, well, this idea that I'm exposing here is based on the documents in the papal archives or in the archives of whatever, Spain or France or whatever. Yeah, but that's fine. I mean, I believe the person, but so what? What makes it to the archives? There is a filter there right away. And just because something has been printed and it existed in print, it's not necessarily true. We need to see the context. And this is where subjectivity comes in. That's a very important word, subjectivity. We always strive for objective representation, whereas we are incapable of it. There are certain things that are objectively true. I mean, there was a Second World War. Nobody will deny that. But on the other hand, how we talk about it, you know, there are still people, fortunately very, very few, who denies the existence of the Holocaust. I mean, that's a pretty subjective idea, isn't it? Or think about everything that you ever think or say depends on your education, on your upbringing, on who you are, where you were born, etc., etc. Your backpack, as I used to say. You know, everything that you are, what makes you up, your mental makeup. So everything is subjective. Whatever I say is a reflection of my experiences as a human being, my goals, if I were to wanting to advance my political goals, which I have none, I would be giving a very positive, glowing speech. You see, the intentions and the experiences together define subjectivity of who speaks. And that is also true in writing. Who writes, also, the authors, they also have their own subjectivities to express. So it's nice that you base your books and your writings on objective sources such as pieces of documents in archives, but you are missing half of the story. What about the people, the people who you won against? I mean, the losers. What about the women? What about the children? What about oral sources? What about other incidental papers that may have gotten lost? You know, you didn't get the whole story just because you base your account on an archive. That's what I'm trying to say. So the race in the US, as W.E.B. Du Bois put it very poignantly, is a badge of social heritage, of colonization and slavery, as probably my predecessor was talking about, the person who gave the talk prior to mine. This is why we consider race a quote-unquote bad thing, because it's associated with inferiority, it's associated with oppression and with poverty and with all that stuff. So when we look at that, we say, this person is probably poor and has a poor education, poor skills, and list goes on and on. And so the race, when we see black or Hispanic or whatever, it signifies all this history. It's not just whether the person has, brown hair or black hair or whatever. It's this history that we are talking about. And that's what we are looking at when we are looking at people of different race. The value assigned to the term in terms of the people in power. And the people in power were the people of European descent, thanks to colonization. So this is why this term has been constructed. And of course there are many other races that I could talk about. I kind of, as I warned you guys before, I focused my talk on blackness thanks to this occasion of the presidential election. But this is the history we are talking about, and that's just the beginning. Now, let's talk about race as biology, because, as we said, we are able to differentiate and distinguish people biologically. So, because of the biological exterior differences, there were several movements, eugenics is one of them, the most notorious, that people try to equate these physical biological traits to internal biological traits such as intelligence, emotions, different things that are in our inner constitutions. So, fortunately, it has been concluded, bell curves or not, that we are the same. We are humans, we have the same capacity, except that it varies a little bit in every one of us. Not just, there can be a stupid white man and a very brilliant and intelligent black woman. There is no correlation between color and gender and capacity. Now, I think I came up with an example to prove how arbitrary this construction of race and value is. Just think about the visible difference. There is a visible difference between blondes and brunettes. There is a visible difference between people with blue eyes or brown eyes. What if tomorrow somebody decides that this will be a basis of a difference in value of the human beings? Just as somebody decided that the brown skin is less appealing than a white skin. So these are arbitrary categories that that go back to the history of European colonization. And I would like to go back to the Roman Empire, in which race was not an issue, at least not like it is in our society. It was simply a difference, like we have the difference between brown eyes and blue eyes. Yeah, difference, so what? So race was a non-issue at all, because there was no history to be associated with it at the time. So therefore, they had a Caesar that was black, Septimus Severus. You know, he was black, and nobody thought twice about it. And this writer that I have her picture up there, Bernardine Evaristo, she is like Obama, half Nigerian, half British. I mean, like Obama in this sense, he's half and half, she's half and half. And she wrote this book, The Emperor's Babe. I recommend it. It's a wonderful book. It's about the Roman Empire in Britain and the story of this black slave girl who will become the lover of one of the emperors. I don't think this one. I think it's another one. But you see them hanging around together and nobody thinks anything about it. So race has not been always an issue like it is in our society. And so I would like to go back. I'm not sure if I have more slides. I'll see. To the oh no, what am I doing?
Picture.
Sorry, I clicked on the picture. That's right. Yes, I would like to go back and revisit my first question: is Obama black, and why everybody's talking about his blackness all the time?
After your presentation, I would say, when we think of black, we not only think of skin color now, but we also associate, you know, all that, the backpack, the satellites you were discussing, where we can't really identify something as black without all the cultural, and not necessarily stereotypes, but all the cultural stigmas that we associate with blackness. You know, maybe the music, maybe the accent, the way they speak, their upbringing, the way they carry themselves, etc. And I think one of the reasons why you could argue Obama is maybe African American, but not necessarily black, is that he has maybe not deliberately, but it's very possible, has gotten rid of all of his quote-unquote blackness. If you watch him carry himself, speak, interact with others, it's almost like he could be, you know, very white. Bill Clinton white. Like it's very easy. Like even hearing him talk, you could, if you didn't see him, you could easily think this man was white. You know, it's a little blunt of an explanation, but I think it's very easy to argue that he's not, in the sense, black, even though he's African American.
This is an excellent point, really excellent point, because there is this distinction between Obama, and I think this made him electable, that he doesn't have this history of slavery, and you know, he doesn't have this same backpack. If it had been, let's say, Al Sharpton or even, I don't know if Martin Luther King could have been elected, you know, who have this package, then I think not. And I think the fact that he grew up in not just white, but also Indonesian, I mean, in Hawaii, in social difference, but it did not make him a player in this social difference the way that some of the black leaders have made him electable. I believe that as well. But I would like to ask you, why would they associate him with blackness? Why not whiteness? I mean, your argument, his culture, his way of speaking, his way of carrying himself is more white than black, if anything. So why is all the fuss? What is all the hoopla about? Yes?
I was just going to say it's interesting to see how society categorizes him and how he categorizes himself, because if you ever hear him talk about how he identifies himself, he always talks about his mom, his grandparents, and where he's from, and all the values that he's been raised, and those are very much American values, which makes him American.
Yes.
But for people who are black or minorities in the historical sense, this is a very different event for America. Because we've never really seen a minority in a position of such high power, like presidency. So for society, like back then, if you had one drop of black, you're considered black.
Absolutely.
If you're a mestizo or whatever, you're considered that race.
That was the comment I was waiting for.
And that's true today, though. That's not back then. That's
Exactly.
still true today in this country.
Yes.
So
Yes.
for today, for people in that community, it's really, it's almost, it brings it full circle to see where the United States has come. Because now, yes, he does look black, and for people who are minorities, they kind of see how minorities have
Yeah.
progressed and everything.
No, this is a wonderful time. It's indeed, it's an achievement. It's a tremendous achievement, and America can be proud of itself and hold its head high again. We have a president that can speak the English language. That's already a wonderful thing. And then also the fact that the U.S. showed to the world that it's not a racist country, because you can indeed be anything you. So it's really a wonderful thing. Yes.
I feel like the media almost looks for the better story as well. Like if you look at
Yeah.
Tiger Woods, he's 25% African American and 75% Asian, but you never hear about him being the first Asian to win this golf tournament or that golf tournament. He was the first black man. So I feel like they see that as beating the historical odds, and that's why they push that story more.
The human stain, as Philip Roth very poignantly put it, although he put it in a Jewish context, but it's it is like a drop of black blood makes you black. Why? Because it already contradicts, I see you, this idea of purity. I forgot to mention that colonialism had this obsession with homogeneity and purity. You heard these negative terms like half-breed or different things. Like you see that racial mixture is a contamination of this purity, and so therefore it's of a lesser value. Whereas today we are talking about hybridity as a positive development, because it draws from more ways and more elements, and it results in something new, something fresh. So our ideas fortunately changed regarding to the 19th century's thinking, which was determined by this civilizing mission I referred to. So this is why blackness operates as a quote-unquote human stain in many ways in our thinking and in our society at large, because it is tied to that history of inferiority. So if you have a little bit, it has to be pointed out, very carefully, because it is a fault, it is a problem. Wasn't it a problem for Obama that he had black features? Of course it was, because of this history, because of this discursive construct that operated as not just a discourse but a curse also. So this is my point, that we see blackness in value rather than just a biological difference, like, okay, well, this is fine, I have brown hair and somebody has black hair, who cares? No, everybody cares. Everybody notices it, and it starts some almost unconscious processes in our mind of classification and reading the difference. He's had it first, and then I'll go to you.
I just had a quick comment. Someone said something that made me think of this. It was very interesting to see in the beginning of the campaign, the early parts where Hillary was ahead, or it was very very close as to who was going to come out on top.
Yeah.
And you had a lot of African American journalists, authors coming on the air and saying, oh well, even if Hillary wins, Obama really wasn't black. And then once he won, now it's
he was not black enough.
Now everyone's celebrating, because it's monumental to have a minority elected.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you, maybe it is a discursive construct and there is no real answer, but do you think that Obama's black or not?
That's a very good question, because I am not exempt from Eurocentrism like none of us are. I am trying very hard to overcome this, but all my education was in this spirit, so it's very difficult, but I do censor myself and I do remind myself of all these things that I told you today. So, but my guts, sure, yeah, I'm no different than all of you. It's there. It's been ingrained from, and so I really can't help. No, I can help it, and that's what I'm working on. And I
Right.
recommend that you do the same.
Yeah. What's interesting is when he was running, most of them talked about being biracial. Once he got elected, he became African American. Now, there's a deeper thread in that. See, for some people, once you label them African American, then you send a message to, and a lot of journalists did this in the newspaper. Rest of you black people, shut up and get yourself together. We don't owe you anything. One of you's here now. On the other hand, it's not the great step that I would have liked that America had the opportunity to take and didn't take because of what you just said, what we've all been taught. And that was to give them full credibility as being biracial, because then you're acknowledging that it's okay to be biracial. You're acknowledging that, which we all know for a fact is, because if you look back to Columbus' time when he came here, 1492, brought only men.
Yeah.
But there was natives all up and down the coast. So we know one of those processes took place. So there's never been any pure race in this country, almost from the very beginning. Women didn't come for almost 100 years later.
Yeah.
So what happens to all of those people, which I fall in the category of, in the state of Delaware? Our tribe, Nanticoke, like many tribes up down the East Coast, are recognized by the state for over 100 years or more. But the federal government says we don't exist. So when this country, the people decided, the journalists, to make them African American, they just marginalize us, all of us, who were in these Native American tribes that remains up and down the East Coast. We cannot become, quote, American Indian, like he could become, quote, African American, even though he was a part. So in actuality, we don't need to pat ourselves too heavily on the back that we really made this. Yeah, we got a person of color that has unlimited ramifications, but we missed a golden opportunity to put the race issue aside by acknowledging that he's biracial, and that's fine, and thereby acknowledging the existence of millions of other Americans who are also biracial. The good thing is, in about 40 years from now, I think this question will be moot, because the majority of people will not be what we're considered white today, but they will be people of color.
Well, the thing is, he has been described as biracial, so
Up until he got elected.
Yeah, but the thing is, the point that I was trying to make is that the way that they said that, oh, Obama is black, he's very black, oh, he's not so black, it has been depending on the person's position who was writing. In his defense, the more liberal wings of the media were saying, well, he has been brought up by the white mother and the values of the white grandpa and all that. The people who were wanting to appropriate Obama as a banner, then Obama is black as
Right.
you can be. So this shows that it's not a biological issue. It shows that
Right.
it's an issue of discourse, and as you know, discourse has always been associated with power. Discourse is an expression of power relationship in any conversation at all. Even in informal conversations, you always know who is the top, who is the bottom. What do I mean? Even if you talk to your buddy, your best friend, or your husband or wife or fiancé, there is always a very, very subtle game of negotiations about power. Whose proposal will be carried out, whether we go to a movie or to a restaurant. Somebody is representing power. Somebody is wanting it more. in everything. And of course, in political discourse, this is 100 times, magnified. But what I'm trying to say, in every human relationship, whenever we communicate, whenever we talk, we are always negotiating power. Because discourse, language is completely, how you say that? It's an embodiment of power, expression of power. And so this is why Obama's race and blackness or whiteness or biracialness is just a matter of who wants to advance what sort of agenda. And agenda is power or lack of power. I'd like to give a chance to Slade.
Are you saying that, like, African American and black are the same thing? Are you, like, trying to, like...
Well, that's a very good point, because
I think that-
black is, he has been described as black, he has been described as African American, and a lot of people who are American, I mean, people who were born here and their fathers and grandfather, they have been described as African American, and Obama, who is, in a way, more of an African American than somebody whose ancestors lived here for 3, 4, 5 generations, he has also been described as black. So I am not the one blurring the difference, it's society.
Well, I mean...
But I understand your
you
distinction.
Said, no, but when Matt asked you whether you thought he was black or not, I was wondering if you're referring to whether he, or whether you, in saying your answer, were saying that they were equal. Because to say, like, everyone says, like, Obama's the first African American president, which is a true statement because he is legitimately a, like, first generation American whose parent was, like, displaced from Africa. But if you're gonna go and say that, like, being black has, like, the same social ties that you were talking about, the same, like, things as African American, I think that's, like, saying a different thing.
I absolutely agree, and if you noticed, I said it a few minutes ago, that I think, and this is my personal opinion, and you can disagree or agree or whatever. I was told never to emit a personal opinion, but I tend to violate that. My personal opinion is that he was electable only because he didn't carry that history of slavery with him. That's why. If he had been, as I said, an Al Sharpton or somebody, or Jesse Jackson, I mean, he ran and he... because of the country is not ready to face this history, just like they were not ready to pay restitution, I think it's called. Yeah, reparations for slavery, which I think should be on the table, or for the Native American population. You know, this should be discussed. And the minute that this discussion can be done at the political level, then we arrived somewhere. Right. Because then they will recognize that there was a history of oppression and injustice. You know, talk is nice, but it's just like what happened in Australia or New Zealand. Australia. I don't know if you remember that the Prime Minister publicly acknowledged the suffering of the native people and asked for forgiveness. Well, that's very nice, but that doesn't change their situation. So this is what I would like to conclude
I like
with.
his statement, though. He said, we're going to the pine and get a dog, and it'll probably be a mutt. And I love it. He did not stop there. Then he said, like myself. And that of all the things he said, when he said that, I thought, that's the way to put the point across, brother. Because he didn't have to say, like myself.
Yeah.
Be a mutt and be proud of it, because we're all mutts anyway. We're living in a dream world. We think we're not.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the...